Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MM360 series we're calling Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I am your host. As a lot of you know me on Instagram as STJ or Slava the Jordanian. I am here, of course, with my one and only co-host, JD Yusef. Good morning, Yusef.
Good morning. Thank you.
How you doing?
Doing well. Thank you.
All right, just a quick reminder. This series is all about creating a space for us to share our stories of our immigration journey. And in order to discover and uncover all the lessons, all the tools, all the inspirational values or beliefs that we picked up on the way to get here, in order for anybody that's thinking of displacing themselves, voluntarily displacing themselves from their home world into a new world, for whatever that reason might be, seeking better education, seeking refuge, escaping arranged marriages, like I did. I had to displace myself and walk as far as possible from that. Or for, the fact that you want to be with family. You might have immigrant families in a new world that you feel like everybody has left you and you need to displace yourself. Also, if you're even thinking about displacing yourself within a country, from a conservative society or a community or a culture into the bigger city, again, to pursue whatever you wanted to pursue in order to empower yourself and fulfill your dreams. And our message basically is mastering an unlimited mindset by eliminating limited beliefs and limited thoughts. Because we do believe limiting ourselves, we're not going to grow. Not making mistakes, we're not going to grow. Not learning, not mastering our mistakes, but learning from our mistakes, we're not going to grow. So a lot of us acquire knowledge by education, by academia, going to school, reading books, attending lectures, watching YouTube videos. But what it needs to happen in order to master a way of success, the type of success that you're envisioning, is to experience life. So the powerful formula is the combination of the knowledge, what we know, and what we have learned from our experience or whatever that process of life that we're going through. All right, I hope all that makes sense. So let's plunge right into it, shall we? All right.
Yeah.
So, Yusef, remember, we watched our favorite professor out of Austin, Texas, give a lecture. It was posted on Instagram, and it caught our eye. And I don't think we have, honestly, enough time for us to address the concepts that he was talking about in that lecture. But let me read you a little bit of synopsis about him and also his lecture title. So according to Professor Roy Casagrande, how exotic that is, professor of government at Austin Community College and a professor of Middle East Affairs at Austin School in Texas. And his lecture opened up by him saying, "We are living in the worst humanitarian displacement ever since World War II. That is 70 plus years ago." Okay, let me repeat that. We are living in the worst humanitarian displacement since World War II. That's the past 70 years. That is a very powerful title for a lecture. And that's why we're talking about what we're talking about here on the podcast and sharing our stories, because the fact that we are feeling, witnessing, and hearing about the displacement of people around the world. Now, we are going to jump into it, and I'll share with you a statistics as the MM360 ambassador to the Middle East, of course, I like to watch what's going on in the world, but then I ask my question, what's going on in the Middle East? What's going on in the Middle East? So we'll share those data with you, but let's discuss this. What do you think, Yusuf?
Yes, I think those statistics are even more stark when you kind of dive deep into them, right? So once you find out that more than, I believe it's one third of them come from Middle Eastern or East African countries, that's very, very telling, right? Um, and that's kind of an indication of our, again, foreign policy, you could say, right? But yeah, very, very, very unique, to say the least.
Yeah, unfortunately, wars displace people regardless where it is, right? Then you have conflicts displaces people. But you cannot deny that war zones, conflict, political oppression, or just greed in general, that starves the people from all resources. And I'm always reflect on children, because children not only are future, I mean they're the future, they're also the present. So our world will manifest itself depending on how we take care of our children, right? And I'm wearing this shirt. It's called the What Cop Initiative. What about the Children in Palestine Initiative? And that initiative, I talk about it on Instagram, is there are millions and millions of children, as we speak, we are 2024, are starving, forced into trafficking, human trafficking, child labor, abuse, right? Because when you create poverty, you pressurize that society, you pressurize that community, and people have to kick in the flight or flight constantly to survive, and that puts a lot of pressure on the children. If the parents cannot make ends meet, they have to take the children out of school, send them into labor, right? Sell this, sell that, go beg in the street, what have you, right? Or work in factories, or pick up a trade that sometimes kids they age so much faster. Not to forget, they get robbed from the opportunity to seek education and knowledge, right? Because the pressure, the feeling of guilt, the feeling of shame, the feeling of honor, pride, that they have to take care of their families. So humanity cannot forget that because X, Y, and Z are greedy and they have an agenda for whatever reason it is, the sufferers are the innocent, which are basically children. But we have millions and millions of children still suffering around the world, everywhere, living in slums, living in poverty, prostitution, violence, because that's when you restrict the resources, they have to do something to survive. You don't give them a whole lot of option. Then you tap into also the migration process, right? How am I going to get out of that? And with this, the lecturer, he said that some of the refugees actually Yeah, exactly. So the same model applies on what kind of personality are you? And I think with the modern approach to our mental health, to our psyche, to analyzing psychoanalysis of our emotions, there are ways, and I thought about this last night, there are ways to find out what kind of personality style I am. There's a lot of testing that you can take about emotional IQ, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, social awareness. And I'm wondering that I think everybody that is considering displacing themselves or migrating in order, and if you're data oriented, right, take that test. And I wonder if that would help whoever is thinking about displacement to find a better spot for them, the personality style, or the even what the level of their social awareness. Like, put it, for example, if you have a very low level of social awareness, I don't think I would go to a big city that's too modern, right? If you are an introverted kind of a homebody person, I think I would go more like a countryside somewhere that has better resources, of course, and better opportunities. I wonder if that would help. But so location and personality. So if you're introverted, extroverted, task-oriented, people-oriented, I think it would be beneficial, don't you think, if somebody will find that out before they decide, especially if displacement by design, by default, of course, it's forced displacement. You have no time to do this, unfortunately. But
Right.
do you think that would have helped?
Yeah, among other things, but I think specifically, maybe that shows itself over time, right? So it's almost like we go through that natural progression subconsciously, right? Because obviously, if something doesn't work to us, it's okay. We'll continue to do something else. It's not a stop sign. So, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the mindset on that, we got displaced by design and by default. You left to your home world. You're in the new world. Now you got to discover what's next. I can't imagine if you don't, especially if you don't have a plan. Like, for example, if you're not saying, I'm going there for college, I'm going there for job opportunity, I'm going there because I have family there. But there's no plan. You have no plan. And you're just going and finding out, okay, I'll figure it out when I get there. It will take a very strong person, mentally and emotionally, to actually just dive into it like a maverick kind of thing. And I've known people that have done that. And I think it was more done way back generation, maybe the baby boomer generation, or even the Victorian classical generation. They just pick up and go. Probably your grandparents are from that generation too, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So they just picked up and they had to go. So we talked about fear. Fear, if it's processed correctly, to be used as a fuel for your drive, could accomplish, to a certain point, in my experience, can accomplish the sense of feeling safe, right? And how we do that is by drawing from our beliefs that we are taught, don't touch this, don't talk to this person, don't go there at night, right? Don't eat that. If you don't feel good, go take a nap. Those are the values and the beliefs that we pack in our subconscious, so to speak, and we carry it with us into the new world, hoping to assimilate as much as possible in the new world. One of them is fear. To me, is the sense of rejection that never left me ever until this day. I always tap into that, and I get triggered, believe it or not, when something doesn't go well, or I ask a question to anybody and they say, that's no, we can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? That for me is so limiting. And I get triggered because, don't tell me that we can't do this. There must be a way. There must be a way. And that never left me, because that triggers me as, okay, I got rejected, or my idea got rejected, or I believe that I should be doing it that way, but they tell me I can't do it that way because it's nobody have done it before. To me, that's a rejection. And when I get triggered, I get dysregulated. When I get dysregulated, I'm in a bad mood. So I have to go and figure out a way to self-regulate myself. So for me, it's fear, rejection. I never really had a hard time with the social awareness. I'll tell you that when I came in 1988, I was very awkward. I was very, very quiet, very introverted, never outspoken. I just kept to myself. But that's the case with most immigrants, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we are taught, right, to put your head down and just do your job.
Yep. Don't make a whole lot of noise, and actually that came up in a conversation you and I had about, it's always, the loudest people in the room who have like the least to offer, and by the way, they say opinion is the lowest form of intellect. So just putting that out there.
Wow. I never heard that one before. That's interesting. It makes sense. It makes sense because the way I grew up, my dad was a deep, deep thinker. My dad was the introverted when it came to his writing and his analyzing the world around himself. But he was the social butterfly. So he's the one who always gets invited to all the parties and the embassies. And my mom was task oriented. She was very militant. Now, remember, my dad is Palestinian from Nablus. My mom is Jordanian from the tribes of Jordan. So those are two different cultures. Although my dad was born in Jordan and his, I think, 3-4 generations before him were born in South Jordan, but he still had the spiciness. My dad was very, very funny, amazing sense of humor. He can drop a joke like nobody's business, and it was random, and he was very clever about it. Yeah, he was very, very funny. He can get us chuckling. I mean, laughing so hard. But he was extreme, right? Because he was introverted as an artist, as a creator, but he was extroverted when it came to opinions and being outspoken about all different stuff of humanity. Humanity can, is considering humanity like civil rights, equality, tolerance, democracy, justice, all that stuff. He was very passionate and very powerful when he spoke. My mom was a lot more consistent. She did not do one or the other. She was more task. And then I mentioned it in a couple of episodes ago that I just feel that in our household, being right is a lot more valued than being loved. And
yeah.
Right. Do you agree with that? Is it the same thing with your parents or grandparents?
I think that's a cultural thing as well. That's a clash of culture here in America, right? But yeah, I definitely identify with that.
What do you mean by it's a clash of culture here in the United States? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So I don't think that here in the West, it's, I guess they cater a little bit more to needs or feelings, right? With our culture, it's very black and white. I can say there's not a whole lot of gray area. And with that, I don't know, the output of a person becomes just a little bit different than, their Western counterpart. Even though, you were still raised in the West, right? Because your home, is kind of what originally influences you and shapes you. But your experiences as a whole makes you. So I do get that.
So you're saying that because in the Western world, they cater for our emotional state and our feelings than our culture does, right?
Very much so, yes.
So have you ever heard from your grandparents if when they were back in Palestine, in Jerusalem, did they really? Well, it doesn't really matter because the conflict was there, so circumstances are different. I wonder if they were back in their home world, they would be more attentive to the mental status or the emotional status, and they care.
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Certainly hypothetical, but yeah, I think I would very much agree with that statement, right? Because we're not um, having to live in these dramatic times, right? That's where that fear originally comes from. So, but yeah, absolutely.
And I wonder, I just thought of this, that we adopt a way to suppress those emotions as immigrants because we believe that we don't have time for emotions because we got to get stuff done. We're here to accomplish, we're here to work, we're here to survive. But, and we don't have the space, a safe space to express our emotions because we have lost that tribal connection and support. We're back in the blood where our home world is. We maybe feel safer, more comfortable expressing our emotions, knowing that we are going to have the tribal support and because of the traditional tribal connection that we have there. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Just because the issues or the realities are just different in different cultures, right? So, I guess being back home, you do feel a little more safe, and it goes back to that saying, it takes a village to raise a family, and I really do believe that, and I've seen it actually work that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, certainly we've gotten away from that.
Yeah, I think it's a subconscious knowledge that we might not be safe to express how we feel about things. Who's going to support us? Who's going to listen to us? Who's going to regulate us if we get dysregulated, right? So what we do, one of the most common pattern for immigrant, and I've seen it with not much my parents, but my in-laws, is they try to assimilate as much as possible without reaching to the level of acculturation, which is 100% assimilation into a new culture. Take it all in, like we said before, strip everything that you know, and then just simulate yourself 100%. But with my in-laws, because I lived with them during dental school too, and I saw they actually created their own community, their own tribe. And it's funny, they had American neighbors and they had, Arab neighbors, but the way they expressed themselves about the American neighbors, although the kids have known each other forever, everybody grew up together, different than the way they express themselves. They feel safer expressing themselves around the Arab friends because they can read you. It's almost like a hidden language. They can read you, they can feel you, they validate you a lot easier. Where when you're with somebody else, you have to explain yourself and you have to give the background and you have to give the introduction in order for them to understand where you're coming from. And for us, it's just too long, I guess, of a process. But that puts a lot of pressure actually on the children because the children of immigrant or children of diaspora immigrants, when they come on, they have to find their identity, right? Where do I place myself? Where do I fit? And yes, they will gain the multicultural adaptability, the multicultural competency, right? But in the beginning, it's hard. That's a lot of pressure on a child, and especially if the parents don't speak the language too. Give you an example. My mother-in-law, she didn't even high school. Allah yarhamha. She spoke Arabic and French because she went to a French Catholic schools in Cairo. So when she came to the United States, she didn't really speak English very, very well. So Ihab, my husband, when he came, he used to tell me when he used to come from school with math, right? And his dad worked double shift, triple shift. So he was never home. It was just him and his mom. His mom didn't speak English, so he had to translate. He was like 4th grade or 5th grade. Translate his math equations problem to Arabic, have her help him, right, get it done. Then he, in Arabic, And then he had to translate it into English himself to submit his homework. And Ehab, my husband, he's not very a nostalgic person, so he's not a storyteller. So when he told me that story, I cried. I'm like, oh, honey, how did you do it? How did you understand? He goes, well, don't get too excited because I got to the point I couldn't translate into Arabic. I was like, how did you do your homework? Luckily, he's wicked smart. He's very, very smart, and he kind of figured it out when he got to 8th grade. He almost knocks me off. It turns me off if I get all emotional, like nostalgic about things.
How funny.
See, I just did it for a year or so. I stopped because I couldn't translate into Arabic. So that is a lot of pressure on a child. But unfortunately, you have no other choice. You had to get it done. His dad had to work double shift, triple shift in order to provide for his family and pay his mortgage. His mom, had to stay home because after, X amount of years working in New York City and commuting, she had a heart issue, thyroid issue, arthritis. So she couldn't really commute from New Jersey to New York for work. And she didn't pick up any talent or other like skills in order for her to do what, they need to provide for the family. So, but my husband's personality, he doesn't dwell on things, but it is still part of him. That's part of his memories, that's part of his history, basically. So that's very interesting. But of course, we're going to talk about the importance of education for immigrants. Any final thoughts, Yusef?
No final thoughts except this was a very, very empowering and enlightening conversation. And thank you so much for your time, Dr. Slava. It's always great talking to you.
Now, the last statement, this is just, I'm going to leave you guys with the statistics. We can talk about it next time. Of course, we always touch base as far as the Middle East and Arab world because that's our world. 300 million Arabs in the Arab world are immigrants or refugees. So that equates to 5% of the Arab world are refugees since it's been destabilized in the last 4 years. Okay, so 5% of the Arab world are refugees since it's been destabilized in the last 4 years, just the last 4 years. So what does that do to our customs, to our traditions, to our livelihood, prosperity as a race? What's our future as a race if this continues? And that's what keeps me up at night, is if we as humanitarians or humanitarian diplomats or humanitarian activists or part of even with the Mindset Mastery 360 movement, if we don't start talking about the impact of these circumstances on our well-being, on our mental health, and on our spirit as humans, right? In order for us to make this world a better place. And don't forget, the children are the ones that pay the highest price, right, for that kind of displacement. Now, this is just the Arab world, and I have statistics about other nations that is constantly migrating, like Yusef had mentioned earlier in this episode too. So that's why we're here. We encourage everybody to continue telling your story. That's how we learn. That's how we know. That's how we grow. Okay? Regardless of how advanced we are technologically, digitally, the human connection by telling our story is going to preserve our humanity. And that's why I say always, for the sake of humanity, keep telling your story. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We have reached to the end of our hour. And please remember that this podcast is going to be available on all platforms for you guys to listen to it wherever you are, whenever you want. And also is going to be available on YouTube. And we hope to see you next time. Be well and peace be upon humanity. Thank you so much.